Hi, this is Jeff Belding, and this video is about my book, Jeff Belding's Guitar Tab Sketchbook. And I'll be talking about how to play the exercise that's found on page 6 and 7. This exercise involves a progression of G for 2 measures, C for 2 measures, D for 2 measures, and G for 2 measures. So let me play that through in a bluegrass rhythm. I'll give you 4 beats if you want to play along. A 1, 2, 3, 4. That last note would be starting over again at the top. So that's your chord progression for these G, C, and D licks. So now let me play the licks for you one at a time, starting at number 1. So I'm on page 6, guitar licks on a typical G progression, part 1. And this page is devoted to half notes and quarter notes only, and that would be all downstrokes of the pick. To help you with the half notes, I put a little quarter rest between the half note and the next note in a measure. Just to remind you, you have to wait an extra beat for that given half note. So here's number 1. I'll count these all off with 4 beats in advance. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, moving on to page 7. Now we're in to part 2, which is about quarter notes and eighth notes. Whenever you come to a pair of eighth notes, the first of a pair is picked with a downstroke, and the second of the pair is picked with an upstroke. Sometimes you'll have 6 or more eighth notes in a row where you'll be playing alternate down and up strokes. So, moving on to number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Before I start number 5, I'll mention that it begins with a hammer-on, so in that case, you play only a downstroke for the 2 eighth notes, letting the second eighth note take care of itself in your fretting hand, with a hammer down, of course. Here's number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. And finally, number 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. So here I am on page 7. I'm looking at number 4 right now. And I'd like to show you how I use the blank tablature paper to mix and match these licks, as I like to call it. So I'm going to take the first 2 measures of G from number 4, and then we're going down to number 5, and I'm going to take the 2 measures of C of number 5. If you're looking at measure numbers, that's measure 35 and measure 36. And then I'm going down to number 6, and I'm going to the bottom of the page to measure 45. I'm going for the D chord part of this exercise. So what I will do now is I will copy the first G exercise and then the C part of the next exercise, and then the D part of the final exercise, and see how those 3 sound together. So here's how I go about my mixing and matching. I start copying the first 2 measures of number 4, put some space there. Next I have a couple 1/8 notes, and then a 1/4 note, then I make a bar line. Stems for the 1/4 notes, 1/8 notes, another 1/4 note, and I'll continue to do that. So here's my first 2 measures of number 4 copied, and another thing I want to do is put my chord above so I know what these licks go with, which chord they are played with. Okay, now I go on to number 5. The 3rd measure in is the C part of number 5, and I will start copying that over. A couple of 1/4 notes, and then for 1/8 notes, so I've completed my 2 C measures. I'll add my C chord to solidify that those 2 licks are for the C chord. Now moving on to exercise 6 and the D chord part of it. Add my D chord to the 2 measures of D. And then I guess I'll just finish up with the final 2 measures of G of number 6. Add my G chords. And I've completed a new form of the licks for G, C, D, and G. Okay, now we'll hear our newly written out order of licks. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, let me make a comment here. When I get to the end of the G lick, the first G lick, that would be the second string, 3rd fret at the end of the first line, I found that this sounded awkward to get from this note down to the low note at the 4th string. Now, there is a method you can use to fix little awkward shifts like that. What I would do is take this last note on the first line, grab my pen, and I would lower that note an octave. This note here is a D. I'm going to take away that D and take it down to the open string, lower D. Now let me play the top line and a little bit of the second line to see if that sounds a little less awkward. 1, 2, 3, 4. That sounded a little better to me. So by simply moving a note an octave, one way or the other, you might be able to smooth out a line. I think I saw a similar problem in the last note on the second line to the first note on the third line. Another awkward jump and maybe an awkward skip of notes. So, how would I fix that? Let me play that second measure of C on the second line. There's my D. How about if I went to the next D line and let me do the same thing. I'll replace this high D with a low 4th string D. See how that flows. From the last measure of C into the third line of D. 1, 2, 3, 4. That sounded much better to me. Used to be, now is. So don't be afraid to try a different note here or there to smooth out a melodic line. So, I hope that gets you started coming up with some of your own combinations of these licks, and that you're inspired to make up some of your own as well. Hope you found this video informative, and I look forward to your feedback in the future on this subject or any others. So visit my website at jeffbelding.com and subscribe to my blog. Until then, keep picking, keep grinning, and keep writing.